Greetings, film fanatics. Filmholmes here, and welcome to another rendition of Too Many Movies. Now this is an unexpected video because I already had a lot planned and didn't expect to do another one. But while I was working on some stuff, on my phone I had all three Back to the Future movies downloaded, and while I was doing some editing and some other stuff, I decided to watch the first Back to the Future movie again because I hadn't in a long time. And then that led to me watching the second one. And then the third one, all in about one night. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite trilogies, and it had been a long time since I'd watched all three, and I figured, well, what the hell, I watched all three, I might as well give my thoughts on them. So that's what I'm going to do here today. I'm going to talk about all three movies in the Back to the Future trilogy. And of course, let's start with, let's go ahead and say it, the best one out of the three, and one of the greatest movies of all time, Back to the Future. Okay, now, I mean, this is of course, the Back to the Future trilogy. Of course, this is how I watched it. I'll just show it this one time. All three movies, awesome set, get it? But Back to the Future. When this movie came out, I wasn't even born yet. I was born in '86, came out in '85. But this movie is timeless. It will always be timeless because, and it was so clever in that way, because it takes place in '85, and it came out in '85. But it shows exactly what 1985 was like, but it's also a time travel movie that goes to 55. And it shows exactly what 1955 was. It's timeless because it's a time capsule. It encapsulates 85 and 55. No one's ever gonna, it's never gonna be dated. It's never going to be dated. And that's amazing. It kills me. It's like this movie will always have a place in history. And that's really cool. But besides that, this was just a very well written, very funny, very fun film. I mean, the story, if you somehow don't know, is that Marty McFly has a friend, Dr. Emmett Brown, who invents a time machine out of a DeLorean, which I still love, and it works. For the first time ever in Doc's life, he created something because he's kind of a mad scientist, but it works. And he's going to go in time and all this stuff. And they never go into Marty and Doc's backstory, how they met. We never really find out. And I kind of like that. There should be some mystery in cinema. You don't have to spell out everything. We don't need to know how they met. It's not a creepy relationship. We don't need to know that. So I really like that, how it just kind of, you know, from the very beginning, you see who Marty really is. You see him with his girlfriend Jennifer, and we get to see his family and how they're kind of dysfunctional. His time at school, how he wants to be a rock and roll star, but he's not going anywhere. He has these dreams and aspirations that may never happen. He's young and makes mistakes, but he's also just kind of cool and hip. He's Michael J. Fox, for Christ's sakes. Michael J. Fox was the man in the 80s. And in my book, he's still the man even today. But Doc gets shot by some people he crossed, and Marty takes the car and accidentally goes back to 1955. And from there, he meets his parents, he meets a younger Doc Brown, and has to try to get back to the year 1985. I mean, Jesus Christ, what a story. It had never been done before. And to this day, hasn't really been done as well as Back to the Future. Because 1955 feels like 1955. 1985 feels like 1985 because it was filmed in 1985. What can you say about this movie? It has so many iconic scenes, from, you know, the opening with I'm late for school, and dun 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 the power of love. That fucking awesome soundtrack, which I do have on my phone, and he does his skateboard thing all the way to school. Who can forget about that? What guy or even girl wouldn't want to recreate that scene in their life? As weird as that sounds, it's like, that's iconic, man. And the DeLorean, iconic. Doc Brown, iconic. Him playing Johnny Be Good on the stage, iconic. The stuff with Biff, the villain, Biff is awesome. I love Biff in this movie. And Leah Thompson, hot mama. Jesus. Beautiful in this movie, but the whole cast does a great job in this movie. Even Crispin Glover, he played the part really well until he lost his fucking mind, but he did a great job. Everyone in this movie is cast perfectly. They do great jobs. Even the minor characters. But so many iconic scenes, him, the clock tower, that whole setup, iconic. It's like so many movies and moments and music that to this day, you know it's Back to the Future when someone brings it up. You don't have to think about it. You know it. You know the name Marty McFly. You know, Dr. Emmett Brown. You know, Dr. Emmett Brown, that's what I said. You know this movie. Even if you've never seen it, you know this movie. That's how big it is. It's one of the biggest franchises in film history. And this is where it started at all. It's the editing is top-notch. The script is top-notch. The directing is top-notch. And yeah, there are parts of the movie that doesn't make a lot of sense or don't add up. And when you really think about it, the whole Marty and his mom thing, it's creepy. But at the same time, it's kind of cute. And it's done innocently. The mom didn't know that was her kid. And even when they kiss, you know, it's gross to her. How would she know? It's 30 years. You know, she doesn't have any kids yet. She's a teenager. And Marty's cool, you know? So it was never gross to me. If people are grossed out by it, to me, they just need to get a sense of humor. It's so funny, the jokes in it, like even Marty going, "This is heavy," and Doc being confused like that. Heavy, there's that word again. Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational field or something like that? And Marty's like, "What?" And Doc Brown with all the technobabble and everything, the scientific mumbo jumbo is just so much fun to watch. And Marty and Doc together, that's a winning combination. You know, that's like a winning tag team in wrestling. It just works perfectly. It's so good. The movie is just delicious. I wish I could put this movie on a plate and somehow eat it, because I would feel fantastic afterward. And that's just it. After you watch this movie, you feel fantastic. You went on this journey. No matter how many times you've seen it, you're always happy to take this journey with Marty and Doc. And that's what a movie is supposed to do, and it can make you forget about your troubles and your worries and just laugh and enjoy an adventure. It is an adventure movie, and it does it almost better than any other adventure movies ever. So what more can you say after that? So even though it does have its flaws, it has its mistakes, Back to the Future is still one of the greatest movies ever made. 5 out of 5. What did you expect? You have to give this movie a 5 out of 5. It's not perfect. Pretty damn close, though. Pretty damn close. Thank you, Robert Zemeckis, for thinking of this movie, because I love you for it. But let's move on to the sequel that didn't really have to happen, and some people are okay with it happening and some people aren't, and I'll tell you what I think about it. In Back to the Future Part 2. So they decided to do Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3, film it at the same time, which was kind of cool, because it came, I think it was about 4 years after this one, and that's a long time, because Back to the Future was a huge hit, so you'd figure there'd be a sequel in a couple years, but they waited, and maybe it's better that they did. And they had to reshoot the opening part from the ending of Back to the Future because they had to get a new actress, because the actress who played Jennifer had to go take care of an ailing family member. So Kelly Preston took her role, which was a shame. You always hate when cast changes happen, and you can tell the difference, you know, but it is what it is. They couldn't help that. And the way they refilmed the opening scene I thought was very clever. You know, they didn't just start with him in the DeLorean in the future, you know, with Kelly Preston. They kind of showed that again. I thought that was kind of clever. But in this one, Doc and Marty, they go to the future, and the future is now past, because it was 2015, 30 years into the future from 1985, and most of the shit that was in this movie did not happen, but at the same time, a lot of shit did happen, and it's kind of creepy how much they did get right. But regardless, Doc and Marty go to the future with Jennifer. They put Jennifer to sleep. Poor Jennifer. She just is always put to sleep in the damn sequels. But to save Marty's kids. And here's my first problem in the story, because if Marty knows in the past that his kids are going to fuck up in the future, then you've already changed the future. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things, the script is not as tight in this one as it was in the first movie. Doesn't make as much sense. And you have to just take your brain out of it. You have to just enjoy it. It's awesome to see Doc and Marty in the future. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. To see what, in 1988, 87, what the future was going to look like back then. That's kind of cool. And of course it didn't live up to that now, but it's neat to see that perception of it. And it's just fun, you know, and they kind of recreate the skateboard scene, which, fine, you know, a callback. It was fun with, you know, Biff's grandchild in the future, which was just fun. I just like how Biff is always a bad guy in these movies. But anyway, they do what they have to do in the future, but old Biff goes to the past and changes the future. So the 1985 they go to is an alternate 1985, which technically the 1985 they went to after they changed the future in 1955 in the first movie. Technically that is an alternate. See, I'm picking it apart again because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. To me it's like, okay, well you change the future for the better for you guys, but if it changes it for anybody else, that's wrong. Now granted, Biff's future, after he changed it in 85, it's hell. Hill Valley basically becomes hell, so I kind of get it. It's better that they have to change it again. But they have to go back to 1955 to undo what Biff did to get back the 1985 that they had at the end of the first movie. It's fucking confusing when you think about it. And it's actually very clever that they have to go back to 1955 again. They were just there like the day before. I mean, we were there 4 years ago, but they were only there 4 days ago, so they have to not run into their old selves. You know, we get to see scenes that happened in the first movie. That whole part is amazing. And a lot of the shit that they pull off, I still want to know how they pulled it off. You know, some of the effects don't hold up as well, but a lot do. And I wonder, like, how did they do that? The overall story is a little bit confusing and doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's a good sequel. It does exactly what it needs to do. We get to see Marty and Doc together again. You know, more questions are answered. We learn more about Marty and Doc. The whole them going to the future was just hilarious and fun. Them going back to 55 was hilarious and fun. And it's just a fun movie. You just kind of have to take your brain out of it a little bit. Some people hate it. Some people love it. Personally, I love it. You know, or at least strongly like. It's just a fun continuation of these characters. So Back to the Future Part 2, I give a 3.5 out of 5. It's slightly above average for me. It's not the best movie, you know, and it's not the best sequel, but it still does a fun job for what it's given. It's not as solid as the first one, but I'll go ahead and say the third one isn't as solid as the first one. They're never gonna do the first Back to the Future again. That was lightning in a bottle. But and you can't recreate that magic. But Back to the Future Part 2 is still just so much fun. And when you watch the first one, you want to watch the second one. And then when you watch the second one, you want to watch the third one to see how everything ends. So that's where we're going to go now. The last part of the Back to the Future trilogy, Back to the Future Part 3. So I knew a lot of people hated this movie. They really hated it. They didn't like that Marty and Doc were back in the Old West. And I love Westerns. So even as a kid, I fucking love the fact that they were in the Old West. I thought that was, you know, they could have gone anywhere, but I'm glad they went to the Old West because I love seeing it. I love seeing, you know, the sets of the West. And, you know, and this wasn't CG, you know, it was real sets. And it looked like an old Western. I really like that. And throughout all the movies, like to have Biff as the villain in all three, I still get joy out of it because I love the actor who plays Biff, and he plays Mad Dog Tannen in Back to the Future Part 3. He does a great job with his little gang. And the story is cool. Like, at the end of Back to the Future Part 2, spoilers, I guess, but, you know, Marty has to get, because he's trapped in 1955 because Doc was transported to 1885, he has to get the help of Doc to send him back there. He does to rescue Doc, but the DeLorean is damaged and they can't get back. They have to find a way to get back to the future, to 1985. But Doc falls in love, and there's a part where, like, Doc and Marty, they switch, where Marty goes, "Great Scott!" And Doc goes, "I know, this is heavy." And we learn more about the characters, and the characters grow in the third one. They didn't really grow in the second one that much, but in the third one they did. Marty finally stops getting so hot-headed over being called yellow or a coward. He grows up. Doc finds out there's more to life than just his inventions. He falls in love. And some people are annoyed by Mary Steenburgen's her character. Personally, I find her charming. She's a little annoying, but I like her. You know, I like her as an actress, but I like her character. And I like the chemistry between her and Christopher Lloyd, so she never bothered me. But the overall story is a good one, and it doesn't recreate anything that I can think of from the first two movies. I mean, like, Biff falling in dung, you have to have that. Maybe a couple other things, but the majority is all original for this movie, and it's done very well. And I also like the ending of it too. It's kind of bittersweet because you know it's the end of the trilogy, and Doc and Marty's adventures have come to a close. And I do want to know how Doc made that train time machine. How the fuck did he do that in 1885? But he's Doc Brown. He can do no wrong. You know, but it's a really fun adventure, and personally, I feel it's a very fitting end to the Back to the Future trilogy. You know, it's much better than 2, and I still really enjoy it. The first one will always be my favorite because it's just that good, but the third one is definitely my second favorite. The second one is third, but the third one I enjoy almost as much as the first one. It's not nearly as good, but I love it. And not just because of the Old West, it's done very well. So, Back to the Future Part 3, I give a 4 out of 5. And some of you may disagree with a 4. Personally, I think this is much, much better than people give it credit for. I really do. It is a very solid movie, very entertaining. It's just fun all around. It really is. And it's a smart movie, too. And it's fun to see Doc in the past trying to be a scientist in 1885, and Marty trying to fit in, and him finding his family members again. It's just a lot of fun. And there you go. Those are my thoughts on all 3 Back to the Future movies. One of my all-time favorite movie trilogies. And like I said, you know, it's just fun. This trilogy is just fun. It's a solid trilogy. I would much prefer watch the Back to the Future trilogy, even with its faults, over like the Matrix trilogy. I mean, for Christ's sakes, that's like one pretty cool movie and 2 movies. Where Back to the Future, it is 3 solid movies. It's just 2 is a lot weaker than 1 and 3. And 2 and 3 could not live up to 1 at all. But at the same time, when I watch the first one, I want to watch 2 and 3. So they obviously did something right. So the Back to the Future trilogy, you know, I recommend it highly. I'll go ahead and say for the entire trilogy, as a rating, I give it 4.5 out of 5. And my ratings may not make a lot of sense because it was a 5, well, it does, a 5, a 3.5, and then a 4. That may not average to a 4.5, but even with its problems, and that some stuff just makes no sense, it's time travel. Time travel makes no fucking sense when you really break it down. This is such a great trilogy of movies, and it's entertaining, and when you watch all 3 after, like, one after the other, it's a 4.5 out of 5. Individually, I gave my ratings, but for all 3, definitely a 4.5 out of 5. I could always pop in these movies and have a fantastic time, and I can even watch each one individually and have a good time. That's just good filmmaking, folks. So, that was the Back to the Future trilogy. If for some reason you've never seen these movies, please go and see them. You will not be disappointed. But this was another edition of Too Many Movies with me, Filmholmes. I will see you in the next video. Take care.